right? I think all three.
Yeah, that's right. Newly released documents from inside Boeing are shining a fiercely negative light on the developments of the 737 MAX jet. In messages that Boeing shared with the FAA, employees boasted about bullying regulators to approve the MAX without making pilots undergo simulator training. Others raised safety concerns and blasted the production process. One of the messages reading, "This airplane is designed by clowns who are in turn supervised by monkeys." The FAA said that the messages do not raise any new safety concerns, and Boeing called them completely unacceptable, but the chairman of the House Transportation Committee called them incredibly damning. Joining us right now to talk more about this is Seth Kaplan. He's a principal at Kaplan Research. And Seth, I guess we should put this in context. These emails were released to the FAA earlier in December. The company's known about these issues. That may explain the FAA administrators' severe crackdown on Boeing and kind of changing the law of the land at this point. What do you think the fallout from these emails will be at this point?
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like putting together a puzzle, or when you don't have all the pieces in there, you sort of know what you're looking at, and then the later pieces kind of confirm that that's what's happening here. Yeah, no, this is all awful. It sort of shows that the news earlier this week about the simulator training, I mean, that was probably a foregone conclusion. Boeing, again, now, what we know today, probably knew all of this was going to come out and that was going to happen. And it finally, to its credit, got ahead of a story after nearly a year of always being sort of the last to come around on something. But no, this is all terrible. Look, struggling here to come up with some kind of, way to put this in a less than awful light. I guess we don't know that these kinds of messages aren't always being circulated about every aircraft program, right? I mean, people inside companies can be cynical. And so, who knows if there are emails like this about other aircraft that haven't gone on to have the kind of start that the MAX had. But beyond that, and again, that's very much devil's advocate, hard to put a positive spin on any of this.
The potential for additional fallout from this, the chairman of the House Transportation Committee calling this incredibly damning. What does that mean now that the public knows about these emails, now that the politicians are going to be involved and potentially the overseers among the politicians?
Yeah, well, here as the months go on, Becky, and we should have ostensibly been closer to the recertification of the aircraft and it getting back in the air, it kind of seems like we're farther than ever away, doesn't it? And all bets are off in terms of the public, if this thing is recertified soon, if it starts flying commercially, in terms of the public feeling okay about getting on the plane, and in terms even of airlines, feeling that way. I mean, I've sort of always been of the opinion that, look, people move past things. They do. Typically, if you just kind of look at any crisis in the aviation industry or beyond it. But this is just all such uncharted territory here that, what's going to happen? I sort of previously thought that when that first flight goes up in the air, there'd be a handful of people who say, I'll wait till the next flight not operated by a MAX. I'm not sure at this point how many people are going to want to get on that first flight, even if ultimately, and the possibility still exists, a decade from now we look back on this as just a horrible start to an ultimately successful program. But right now here you have Boeing, test pilots saying, I don't know if I'd put my family on the plane in these communications. And the only solace is that, of course, the plane, by the time it's recertified, will have improved from the state that it was in back when these employees were making these statements. But we're still talking about an aircraft that is very different from others, Becky, as we've discussed before. An aircraft that, whereas most aircraft, you design the plane first, physically, aerodynamically, and then the technology comes in. This was an aircraft where the technology was meant to correct issues physically with the plane that came from the fact that it was an updated version, and the new engines didn't fit like Boeing wished they would have on the old plane.
You think there's any chance that there's a much more significant restructuring of the 737 MAX that has to be done before it's recertified?
At this point, if you look at all of this, I don't know, by the way, that these emails change a lot in terms of just the very basic facts that we've known about this plane. It just shows.
No, but as you pointed out, the very basic facts about this plane are not very heartening.
Are not very heartening to begin with, right? And so then this just carries that forward. And then there were the reports recently that maybe there are other physical things that have to be changed about the plane. Reports a week or so ago, which then would make that whole decision to keep producing the plane. Remember, it was supposed to be a software issue that, yeah, you can keep producing them and then upload the new software. If you got to go retrofit the planes in some way, that would be a whole mess. It would take a long time to get those planes that are already produced in the air. But yeah, no, I mean, we've gone from, I think a couple months ago, I said, well, I guess there's a non-zero chance that, this is all much worse than we think. And I still think more likely than not at some point here, not this quarter. I don't know at this point, and from an airline perspective, right, and a passenger perspective, this is mid-January where the impact on airlines of having some grounded planes is minimal because you always have some parked planes right now for most airlines around the world. That's kind of the case through most of February. But as you get into spring break, Passover, Easter, Memorial Day, then the impact ramps up again. And is anybody willing to bet right now that these planes are actually flying passengers in commercial service by any of those dates, in time for the summer peak? But as you said, the question isn't that. It's the long term. And at this point, it looks worse, doesn't it?
Yeah. Seth, thank you. It's good to see you today.
You got it, Becky.
Okay. Meantime, Facebook is